Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The hallway light flickered above me as I zipped the duffel bag shut. It was 5:25 am. Not a poetic time to leave, but poetic had nothing to do with it. It was surgical, precise, clean. The house was still. Not silent like peace, silent like aftermath. I had been planning this for weeks. Ever since Dad had dropped the final insult like it was routine. Teddy graduated, he'd said, handing him the keys to the Audi across the table. You deserve it. Unlike some people, Nora, starting next month, you will need to pay $720 per month for housing rent. That was the night I stopped asking to be seen. I started collecting. Downstairs, the kitchen reeked of burnt toast someone had forgotten to throw out. I placed the envelope on the table, weighed it down with a chipped coffee mug. The envelope was thick, not with emotion, but evidence. A ledger, my life in figures. Food, $4,320. Utility services, $4,300. Heating system repair, $7,250. Roof repair, $3,700. Emotional labor rendered incalculable. At the top of the page, in all caps, I'd written, "This is not a GUTBIELETTR. This is a RECIPT." The air was damp with morning. I paused in the doorway. I didn't want to cry. I wanted clarity to be the last thing that lived in these walls from me. A creak behind me. Teddy. He scratched his head, yawning, boxers and pride hanging low. You seriously leaving? I turned slowly. Are you seriously pretending you're surprised? He chuckled, shrugging. You've always been dramatic. I've always been invisible. That's not the same thing. Right. So now you're gonna go be... What, a martyr? He smirked. No, I'm going to be free. I left him standing in the dark, one eyebrow raised, too arrogant to realize he just lost the only person who ever kept a record. Out on the porch, the sky was still purple-black. I tightened my grip on the duffel. The weight didn't come from clothes. It came from what I'd taken with me, truth. Not just mine. Aunt Sarah's porch light was already on when I arrived, though the sun hadn't risen. She opened the door before I could knock, wearing her robe, glasses askew, eyes soft with understanding. I had a feeling, she whispered. No questions, just arms. I hadn't cried in months, but standing in her hallway, the scent of chamomile and lemon cleaner tugging at memories I thought I'd buried, something inside me cracked. Not a sob, just a slow, burning ache behind the ribs. I left them a letter, I said, my voice rasping from exhaustion. A receipt, actually. She raised an eyebrow. You always were precise. Just like your grandfather. I froze. You still talk about him? Of course I do, she said, leading me to the kitchen table. He was the only one in that family with any real soul. The attic creaked beneath my feet as I stepped onto its warped floorboards, my flashlight beam sweeping through old boxes stacked like forgotten memories. Aunt Sarah had given me permission to look through Grandfather Richard's belongings, stored untouched since his funeral. He trusted you, she had whispered that morning. He'd want you to have what's yours. I found the box shoved behind a broken lamp and 2 dusty wreaths. Its flaps were sealed with brittle yellow tape, and on the side, in Richard Null's elegant handwriting, it simply read, Family Trust, Personal Notes. My hands shook as I peeled the lid back. Inside were 6 leather-bound journals, carefully stacked, their covers cracked with age. A faint scent of tobacco clung to them, my grandfather's favorite pipe. Beneath them was a heavy envelope marked Confidentiel, tucked between a manila folder and a photograph of me as a 10-year-old, sitting on his lap at the lake house. I swallowed hard. Back downstairs, I settled onto Aunt Sarah's couch. It was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the wind rustled the dry leaves. The moment I opened the first journal, I felt like I was opening something sacred. The entries were meticulous. Grandpa Richard had documented every financial move since the year I was born. Notes on the establishment of my education trust, conversations with legal advisors, and charts showing compound interest calculations filled the early pages. His writing was precise, almost loving. Then I reached the entry dated March 2, 2019. Philip pressured me again. Says Teddy's tuition is urgent. I told him no. Nora's trust is not to be touched. He hung up angry. Something feels off. My jaw clenched. My father had asked for the money before. He'd been denied. So how did he eventually get it? The next journal answered that. Received notification that POA was activated during Nora's health emergency. But legal offices confirmed. Signature looked forged. I dropped the journal. My heart pounded. I remembered that time. How I could barely get out of bed. How I had been overworked and underfed. And how Dad had taken over temporarily to manage things while I was in recovery. Aunt Sarah found me in that state, knees pulled to my chest, journal scattered, tears burning my eyes. "Nora," she said softly, kneeling. "What is it?" I held up the entry with shaking fingers. He used my trust. Grandpa told him no, but then during my breakdown, he must have faked the signature. It's here. It's all here. Sarah didn't hesitate. She took the journals from me and began scanning the pages with eyes narrowed in focus. Sarah looked up, something dark flickering behind her eyes. "Your father used the power of attorney during your breakdown, signed off on transferring your college trust to cover Teddy's last 2 years at university. He told the bank you weren't in a state to manage it." I couldn't speak. I couldn't blink. The room pulsed in silence, every heartbeat like a knock against my temple. I thought I finally managed. It was just favoritism. I didn't know it was theft. Sarah reached across the table, gripping my hand. It was both. "This is bad," she said under her breath. "Really bad, but this also means we can do something." I pulled out my own folder, old bank statements I had printed for years, mostly out of habit. I had highlighted suspicious withdrawals before, but now, with the dates from the journal, they lit up like beacons. February 17, $18,000. March 12, $24,000. April 4, $32,000. All traced to an account under my father's business name, Knoll Solutions Incorporated. "This," I said, pointing, "matches the exact dates the journal mentions, and I never signed a single authorization. They stole from me," I whispered, when I was too broken to fight back. "But you're not broken now," she said firmly. "And you're not alone." For the first time in years, I believed her. Sarah looked up, her voice low and fierce. "Then we go to Alan. First thing tomorrow." Alan Keene, her longtime attorney and family friend, took us in with a furrowed brow the next morning. After reviewing the journal excerpts and my bank statements, he leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "You have a legal case, Nora. Multiple, actually. Trust misappropriation, forgery, financial abuse, possibly even wire fraud, depending on how the transfers were routed." I barely breathed as he continued. "Given your vulnerability during that period, we can also file under fiduciary misconduct. But we'll need to confirm the forgery. I know someone who can analyze the signature on file with the trust documents." I nodded slowly, my throat dry. He thought I'd never find out. Alan met my gaze. "But you did. And now it's time he learns what that means." I left the office with a folder under my arm and a flame in my chest. The silence I'd carried for years had finally cracked open, and now every broken seal would speak. The message came at 2:13 a.m., a voice memo from an unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Then I tapped play. Teddy knew. He said it wasn't his fault your money was taken, said your dad did what was necessary. I left him that night. My breath caught. It was Olivia, his ex. The girl he paraded on every family holiday, who once whispered to me in the hallway, "You deserve better than all this." I forwarded the message to Aunt Sarah, my lawyer, and saved a backup in the cloud. Evidence. Concrete. By morning, I sat across from Sarah in her home office, every muscle coiled. "He let them rob me," I said, and said nothing. "He benefited from it," she replied flatly. "And silence is complicity." We filed the petition that same day. Fraudulent misuse of trust funds, forged authorization, conspiracy to commit financial abuse. My lawyer, Ms. Rayner, said it might take weeks to freeze assets, but the moment she reviewed my grandfather's sealed letter, she changed her tone. "We're not just freezing," she said. "We're demanding repayment." Hours later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. "You're tearing the family apart, Nora. This isn't how grown-ups handle things." I stared at the phone and whispered, "You tore it apart the day you chose a son over a daughter." Sarah touched my arm. "You're not just fighting for justice, you're rewriting your inheritance." The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and old paper, but the air burned with tension. My father sat 3 rows ahead, jaw tight, hands clenched like fists hiding secrets. Teddy wasn't beside him. He hadn't shown. Cowardice comes dressed in many faces. The judge's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Based on the evidence provided, unauthorized fund redirection, forged documents, and testimony, the court rules in favor of Miss Nora Knowles. I didn't cry, not yet. The restitution amount was exact. Every cent drained from my educational trust, plus a $10,000 penalty for punitive damages. But it was more than money, it was acknowledgement. The truth was no longer buried under years of favoritism and falsehood. As we walked down the courthouse steps, Sarah slipped her arm through mine. "You did what none of them expected. You stood up." "And didn't flinch," I whispered, my voice steadier than it had felt in years. My phone buzzed. A new message. From Teddy. "I thought Dad was right. I didn't want to lose what I was given. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, then locked it. "I don't need sorry," I said aloud. "I need a future." Back at Sarah's, I opened Grandpa Richard's final journal. Tucked inside was a faded note. "The Knowles name once meant honor. If it ever does again, it'll be because of you." And I finally believed it. I wasn't just Nora. I was Nora Knowles, rebuilt, unbent, and no longer invisible.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.